Hello everyone, I thought I'd try out another game of Brethren, which is a Dark Age and Ancients set of rules, skirmish level rules. Um, I'm basing the scenario on an entry in the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle for the year 789, which reports on a Danish raid on the Wessex coast of three Viking longships, where the reeve was killed, accosting the party, and it's relevant chronologically and historically because the most notable, the beginning of the era of the sort of the first Viking age of invasions is put down as being the year 793 with the raid on Lindisfarne, and the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle was compiled during the reign of Alfred the Great, so about 100 years after those events. And it's thought that the entry for 789 was placed there to sort of credit the Kingdom of Wessex as being the first area of Britain to come under attack, and give the sort of Wessex kingdom a little bit more credibility in terms of leading the resistance to the Viking invasion. So whether it actually took place or not, or whether it was as significant as the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle makes it out to be, is debatable. But anyway, I thought it would make an interesting scenario for a game. So on the camera there at the moment, you can see the reeve and some of his force. I've got about, I'll tell you exactly, I've got 57 figures representing the Anglo-Saxons and only 46 representing the Vikings. So you can, if I zoom in a little bit, you can see some of the Vikings just disembarking from their longboats there on the other side of the table. And I'm going to play out the game mainly off camera. This is about the sort of upper end of the size of game you can play using the Brethren rules, and you do have to move most of the figures individually. The various commanders, the combat heroes, so you can see one there, just at the prow of the ship there. They can give orders to units, so you can move groups, but in the main, the movement is done on an individual base by base system. There's another combat hero there. So that does take a little bit of time. It's not terribly interesting to watch, so I'll probably do the movements off camera, and then a lot of the missile fire off camera, and then show you the dice rolls for the individual combats, because that's what I really like about this set of rules for the Dark Age period. That it does, you can play with relatively large size armies such as this, but the game, the combat always breaks down into individual groups of figures fighting their own separate fights, and to me that is quite representative of the nature of fighting at this time. Earlier on in the Ancients period, when you have drilled armies such as the Roman army, I'm not sure that the rules are quite so appropriate for that sort of fighting. But where there was little in the way of of drill. You had formations such as shield walls and so on, but to me the essence of the fighting was it always came down to individual fighters squaring off against one another, and this sort of rules I find works perfectly for that. So the camera's gone out of focus. I'm trying to pan the camera around a little bit, show you a little bit more of the scenery. So basically it's 3 Viking longships coming ashore at the site of a sort of coastal settlement and being accosted by the Anglo-Saxons, and I'm going to be fighting the scenario where you have to reduce the opponent down to 20% of their figures. Right, so I'll make the first moves and then we'll get on to some of the dice rolling. Okay, so first turn movement and firing is all over, and essentially just what happened is that the 2 sides moved closer together. No contact made, but a lot of missiles shot by the Anglo-Saxons, all at one target, which was the support hero with the standard there. 12 bowmen tried to bring him down, all failed, so no casualties on either side, and therefore no need to take a morale check. Not that there would be one in this turn anyway, because there aren't any figures within 6 inches of a opponent's hero. Okay, so I'll do the same thing for the second turn, make all the movements and missile firing, and then resolve any combats that occur. Okay, so all the units on both sides have now moved. The missile fire from the Saxons was a lot more effective, and they have already caused 3 casualties on the Vikings here, including the standard bearer, who required 2 hits to kill him rather than 1. And there are now a number of fights going on. There's also been on both sides some shield walls formed, so the Vikings have a shield wall here now, and the Anglo-Saxons have a shield wall here surrounding the reeve, but none of those shield walls are involved in any fighting at the moment. However, there are a few contacts. There's some Vikings fighting a housecarl here, and down in this area here, there's quite a lot of contact here. A few Saxon housecarls involved, but over here the Feared have got into contact as well, and they're not likely to perform as well. So now we have to go through and determine the results of each of those fights, and I don't think it's particularly important in terms of who chooses which fights take place first of all. So I'm going to start down this end here, and we'll begin with this fight here between the Viking with a Dane axe against 2 Feared. One is against 1 Feared, but he has another Feared behind him supporting him with a spear. Okay, so the Viking with the Dane axe rolls 2 dice plus an additional 2 dice for the Dane axe, and the Feared member only rolls 1 dice, but he gets an additional dice for the support he's got from behind. So it's 4 dice against 2. Vikings are white. Okay, so the 6 wins that. The Saxon 5s negate everything below it, so the Viking has got 1 hit on the Anglo-Saxon, so he now rolls against the Anglo-Saxon's defence, which is 2 + 1 for the shield, gives him a defence of 3. So he has to beat 3, and he doesn't. Right, so that was this combat here. No one was killed, but the Saxons lost. So this figure has to move back 1 inch, and if there's only 1 figure behind him, that figure moves back 1 inch as well. And then we go on to the next combat. Okay, moving along then, we have similar situation, and this Viking is armed with a sword, so being a raider he gets +1 to hit, but he's only rolling 2 attack dice, and this is the same here. You have a feared, Anglo-Saxon feared, rolling 1 dice, but getting an additional dice for the spear supporting him behind. So it's 2 dice against 2, but +1 to the Viking roll. Okay, so that goes up to 6, and you can't modify higher than 6, by the way. So we have 2 dice drawing there, so we roll those again, and that goes up to 6. Meaning that the Vikings have won the combat. So once again, it's a defence of 2, +1 for the shield. So the Viking has to get 4 or higher. And again, he fails. So the same again. No casualties, so those 2 get moved back. And we move on to very similar fight here. 1 feared supported by another, fighting exactly the same, a Viking with a sword and a shield. So it's 2 against 2 again, +1s to the Viking roll. Okay, so that goes up to 4, and the other goes up to 6, meaning the 2 successful hits, and we have to get 4, 5 or 6 to kill. Yeah, there's 1 6 there, so that we just turn him over temporarily, because we have to count up the number of dead on each side at the end of the turn, so we have to leave him on the table for the moment. And we move on to this identical situation again behind, so exactly the same dice again. That goes up to 2, so it matches the Anglo-Saxons roll, but that goes up to 4, meaning that the combat's been won by the Viking again, but they only get a 2, so no kill. So both of those move back 1 inch, and then we move on to this Viking hero here against Housecarl with a Danax. So the Housecarl with a Danax will be rolling 2 dice plus 2, so 4 dice, whereas the Viking hero has 3 attack dice plus 1 to hit because he's wielding a sword. Right, so the highest that the Viking is going to roll is a 4, because those 3s go up to 4, whereas the housecarl has got a 6 and a 5, so it has 2 successful hits there. Now the Viking hero's defence is 4 plus 1 for the shield, so the Saxon has to roll 6s to wound, and doesn't, and it wouldn't have been a kill because the effectively the Viking has 3 health, so he needs 3 wounds to kill him. So the Viking lost, has to move back an inch, and then we move on to, I think you can still make the figures out from this angle, but there are basically here 2 Vikings. One of them is a Bondi with a spear and a sword, so they're both one-handed weapons, so I'll work out the dice for that in a moment, but you get additional dice for the second, I think you do, or you get a reroll, something like that. So one has a spear and a sword, the other just has a spear, but is armoured, so he must be a raider rather than a Bondi freeman. And then they're supported by another raider with a spear, so he'll lend another dice, and they're fighting against housecarl just armed with a single-handed axe. Okay, so I'll work the dice out for that and then we'll do the rolling. Right, so it's a little while to work out. Basically, the Viking freeman gets to roll 1 dice, but he can re-roll it because he's got a weapon in each hand, and he also gets a second dice for the support behind, so I think he's allowed to re-roll that as well. So he's rolling 2 dice, which I'm going to use a smaller dice for to distinguish. So he's rolling 2 dice with re-rolls, and the Viking raider behind him gets to roll 2 dice, and that is yeah, that's just the number. He doesn't get any supplements or anything like that. Whereas the housecarl fighting with an axe gets to roll 2 dice, but because he's Anglo-Saxon housecarl yielding an axe, he gets some additional dice. So it's 4 dice against 3, 2 of the 4 can be re-rolled. Let's roll that in there. Right, so the Anglo-Saxons have got a 6, so everything below that can be removed, but I can re-roll that 5 just to see if I get a 6. No, I don't. So we're re-rolling all those 2 against 1 there, and I'm able to re-roll that smaller dice, which I want to do. No, so the Saxons come out on top with 1 wound, which they are going to try and inflict 1 hit, which they're going to try and inflict a wound on the freeman with the spear and shield, who's got a defence of 2. Sorry, sword and spear, who's only got a defence of 2. Rather than the raider, who's got a defence of 3. Right, so I've got to get higher than a 2. No. So after all that, I just get moved. Those 3 figures, Viking figures, get moved back an inch, and then we're on to this fight here. This guy I'm calling a housecarl, an armoured housecarl, even though he hasn't got armour on. So there are two Viking freemen, or bondi, with spears against a housecarl with an axe and shield. So we know that will be 3 dice for the Anglo-Saxon. The two spearmen will only get 1 dice each, I believe. Yeah, 1 dice each. Right, there are no adjustments to be made. So both sides have got 1 5 each, so we re-roll those. And the Anglo-Saxons come out on top. And both of that chap's opponents have got a defence of 2 plus 1 for the shield that they're carrying. So I've got to beat 3, which I do. Right, so 1 dies, and then I presume the other one has to move back an inch. Okay, there's just 1 more combat to resolve. I'm afraid it's typical Plymouth afternoon. It's not 3 o'clock yet, but it's already getting quite dark, so I'll put the camera onto a low lux setting to try and improve it. But I'll probably have to give up the game until tomorrow after this for the lighting to improve. But here we have a Saxon housecarl with a sword and shield against a freeman and a raider. The raider has a spear. The freeman has a spear and shield. So that would be, we know that's 3 dice for the Saxon. Oh, is it? It might be more than that actually. No, 3 dice. No, sorry, it's 2 dice, but plus 1 to hit. He's not using an axe, he's using a sword. And the Vikings have 1 dice for the freeman with the spear and shield, so we use a small dice for him, and the other one was just a simple spear in the hands of a raider. That's 2 attacks. So it's 3 dice against 2. No re-rolls or anything. Oh yeah, plus 1s to the Anglo-Saxon dice. Okay, so you can't modify higher than a 6, but the 5 can go up to a 6 as well. That means that the Saxon housecarl has definitely won that, and he is going to now, not sure about the rules here. I think he's going to split. I think you have to roll both the dice instantly. I don't think he can decide whether he's killed one. Don't know how to play it. But basically, both the Vikings only have 1 health. So I think I'll start. Yeah, I think you can probably determine what you do with the dice. So I'm going to try roll 1 dice first of all to beat the raider with the spears defence, which is 3. Yeah, because the guy with the spear and the shield would be 2 plus 1, which would be 3 anyway. So let's see what happens. So he's going to try against the raider first of all. Doesn't, so he's going to try again, and doesn't. So no kills. So all that means is that the 2 Viking opponents get pushed back an inch. And just having a quick look, but I think that is all of the fighting over with now. So we count up the dead on each side. and there are no no Saxon dead whatsoever that I can see. Oh yes, there is. Yeah, there's one feared killed, but definitely more Vikings, especially because of all that missile firing at the beginning. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 Viking dead. So the Saxons can compel the Vikings to take a morale check. So well, unfortunately, oh yes there is. Yes there is. I was going to say there were no. No Saxon heroes within 6 inches of the enemy. So let's just work out what we're going to do there. Right, so there's an obvious spot on the battlefield to pick, which is over on this flank here. So there is an Anglo-Saxon hero here. He's a support hero, and he also has a horn, which means he is a fear specialist. So once per game, he can influence any enemy units within 12 inches of him and reduce their morale down by 2. And there is this massive group of Vikings here in a shield wall and a couple of others outside of the shield wall here and a couple of others outside it but within the circle, as it were, there. So there are a lot of Vikings within 12 inches of the Anglo-Saxon who are also within 6 inches of this unit here, this hero here. So all of these Viking figures are going to have to take a morale check, and they're a mixture of freemen and raiders, so they're either going to have a morale of 10 or 8, and that's going to be reduced by 2 because of the effect of the fear from the horn, which means they're going to be reduced to a morale of either 8 or 6. So I'm not going to show you all the dice. So you roll 2 dice basically, and you have to beat it to remove them from the table. So if they roll either 8 or 6 respectively or lower, they're fine, they stay on the table. So we're going to start here with this Freeman who's got morale of 6, and I roll 7, so he comes off the table. This chap is a raider, so he's now got a morale of 8, and I roll 10, so he comes off the table. Then we'll do the hero in the middle, who is now 8, and I roll 6, so he is fine. And then we'll start with that guy there. He is 8, and I roll 8, so he's fine. This chap here is another 8, and I roll 4, so he's fine. This chap is another 8, and I roll 8, so he's fine. This chap is a 6, and I roll a 6. I'm not sure whether I've done him. I don't think I have. So he's an 8, and I roll an 8. Here's a 6, and I roll a 7, so he comes off. Here's a 6, and I roll a 4. He is, I'm having to look in the, it's so dark now. Yeah, here's another Freeman, so here's a 6, and I roll a 5. He is an 8, I roll a 9, so he comes off. He is an 8. I roll an 8. He is a 6. And I roll a 9. So he comes off. The Vikings are running away right at the beginning of the game. This chap is a 6. Just a quick look while I'm leaning over. He is another 6. And he is 8. Yeah. Right. So 6. And I roll 10. Off he comes. 6. And I roll 3. And 8. And I roll 9. So they've just lost through morale alone 7 figures, which is pretty catastrophic. But anyway, that is the end of that turn. It's ridiculous that I feel the light is so bad that I have to give up already. I might try going for one more turn before I call it a day. Well, I was about to give up, and then because the lighting did get so bad, and then I thought I'd try a little experiment, and I used the well, I am using the light that I purchased at Warfare about a month or so ago, and it's extremely bright, so you can't point it at the table, but I'm reflecting the light off the ceiling, and it seems to give a kind of daylight impression. So I'm going to carry on the game into the evening now, I think. So here we go then with the next move, which I'll make the moves off camera again, and then show you the dice rolls for the conflict. Okay, so a lot of contact made in this turn. Just pointing the camera at that area there where you can see the shooting from the archers, the Anglo-Saxon archers, was quite effective again, and there are another 3 Vikings down. You can see 2 of them there, the other one's behind that hut. But as I say, lots of contact made now, so I'm going to start with the melees down, the fighting down this end here, and we'll start here with Viking raider armed with a spear and a sword against this feared member armed with a spear. Now he's allowed to re-roll, the Viking this is allowed, because he's got 2 weapons, one in each hand, he's allowed to re-roll one of his attack dice, of which he has 2. The sword allows him to the sword gives him a +1 to his attack, so I'm using a large dice for his sword and a smaller dice for the spear, but he can re-roll either of them, and he gets +1 to the larger dice, and the feared member doesn't get any mods or anything at all. Right, here we go. So that one goes up to +5, and he's allowed to re-roll. Well, he doesn't need to, because he's beaten both of the he's beaten the Anglo-Saxon roll with both of those dice, so he's got 2 hits effectively. So he has to, this particular feared member doesn't have a shield, so his defense is even weaker than normal, so he would have a defence of 2. So 3 or higher on any of these dice will kill him. No, 2 and a 1, unbelievable. Okay, so he simply moves back 1 inch. I was about to say that I was expecting the Vikings to do quite well out of this this turn now that they've made contact with so many of the enemy, but we'll have to see if that bad dice throwing continues. Okay, so now we have a feared member with a spear and a shield against a raider with a Danax. So that is 2 plus 2, 4 dice, and this is just 1 dice. Well, Vikings' luck is not holding up, or not reversing, because the Saxons rolled a 6, so now it's those 2 tying dice, and the Saxon wins it. Okay, so the Viking has a defence of 3, and it kills him. Okay, so that Viking dies. Saxons are defending their homeland. Okay, so over here we have a Viking raider with a sword and a shield against a feared with a spear, supported by another feared with a spear. So the raider will get +1 to his hits, and he's rolling 2 dice, and the Anglo-Saxon rolls 1 dice that gets additional dice for the support from behind. And the Saxons win again. Oh, hang on. +1 to hits for the Vikings, so that 5 goes up to a 6. So those 2 tying dice roll off against one another, and you can't modify up higher than a 6, so that is a tie again. And that this time is a win for the Viking. So this feared member has a shield, so his defence will be 3. And the Viking only throws a 2. So both of these 2 move back 1 inch. And then we are on to similar fight here. Feared with a spear, supported by another with a spear, against a Bondi or a freeman, this time armed with a spear. So we know that the Anglo-Saxon is going to be rolling 2 dice. The Viking will only be rolling 1, however. And the Anglo-Saxons definitely won that roll. So the freeman Viking has a defence of 2. That's right. Yeah, defence of 2. No, a defence of 3, because he's got a shield. Yeah, defence of 3. But he's dead. Yeah, this is looking like a bit of a trouncing for the Vikings then. Okay, so over here we have Viking with a... Sorry, point the camera. I'm talking about. So Viking with a sword and a shield against a feared member, unsupported this time. So that's just 1 dice for the feared with the spear. But the Viking with the sword and shield rolls 2 dice and gets +1 to his dice rolls. So that goes up to 6. So 2 successful hits, and he's trying to overcome a defense of 3 and fails. My word. So the Anglo-Saxon just gets pushed back an inch, and then here we have Viking raider with a sword. I think I'm allowing him a shield because he's got a shield on his back. I think that's how I costed him. So this will be exactly the same again. 2 dice, adding +1 against 1 dice. Oh, what am I doing? Roll 3 Viking dice there. Okay, so both the 5s go up to 6, so they're all matched. And the Viking, not the Viking, the Anglo-Saxon wins it again. So he has to overcome a defense of 4, 3 + 1 for the shield. No, fails to do it. So the Viking gets pushed back an inch. And then we have here a raider with a spear and a sword against an Anglo-Saxon with a spear. So this is similar to an earlier fight we resolved. 2 attacks for the Viking, +1 to hit for the sword. So we use a large dice for the sword, and he can re-roll either of the attacks because he's using 2 weapons, and the Anglo-Saxon only gets 1 dice for his spear. Okay, so it's +1 to the sword, takes him up to 3, and the Anglo-Saxon has rolled a 4, which is beaten by the 5, so I'm going to re-roll that 3, and it's 6, so 2 wins to the Viking, trying to overcome a defense of 3, and again fails. So again gets pushed back. So I don't think so far, I don't think there's been a single Anglo-Saxon casualty. So where's next? We'll do this one next. So it's a Viking freeman with a sword. So he only has 1 attack. Yeah, 1 attack against an Anglo-Saxon housecarl with an axe. So he has 2 attacks plus 1 for the axe, so he has 3 attacks. So it's 3 dice against 1. And the 6 wins it. So the freeman has a defence of 2, but an extra 1 for the shield, so 3. And he's killed. Well, I think this is just very bad luck for the Vikings, rather than, you know, them being a lesser quality than the Anglo-Saxons. I think it's just awful dice rolling. So next up then we'll do the hero, who is engaged with another housecarl with an axe, but he is supported this time by a freeman with a spear. So he would he is rolling 3 attack dice plus 1 to hit, and he gets an additional dice which wouldn't have a plus 1, I don't think, or would it? Yeah, I think, yeah. I'm not sure how you interpret this rule. Well, give him 4 dice, giving him plus 1, and the housecarl with the axe is the same as the previous combat. 3 attacks, but no bonus or anything. He gets a 3rd attack dice for wielding the axe. Right, what did I say about that? Yeah, the Viking gets plus 1 to his hits, so that would go up to 5, beating the 4s. So he's got 2 successful hits, but the housecarl is quite well protected. He's got a defence of 4 and an extra 1 for the shield, so only 6s are going to kill him. Oh, we got 6. Change of luck. So that is the first Anglo-Saxon casualty in this combat. Right, then we move on. You can just about make out there another housecarl with an axe, so that'll be another 3 dice again against a freeman this time, Bondi, with a sword and a spear. So he only gets 1 attack, but he gets to re-roll it because he's got 2 weapons, 1 in each hand. So I think you leave those as they are, 5, 4 and 3, and just re-roll the 4, and we get 5. So that has helped, because that means now that those 2 5s roll off against one another, and it's 2 6s, so you can't modify it up, so we just have to re-roll them again, and this time we can re-roll that 3 to hope to beat the 5, and we do. We get a 6. So the it's a successful attack, so then we have to see if we wound, and the defence was 5, 4 for the heavily armoured housecarl plus 1 for the shield, so we need a 6, and we only get a 1. Okay, so the housecarl is pushed back. And then up this end of the table, the last combat up this end of the table is a housecarl with an axe against two Vikings. One is a raider, one a freeman, both armed with both armed with spear and shield. So we know that the housecarl with the axe is 3 attacks. The freeman only gets 1 attack dice, but the raider gets where are we? Raider, spear and shield gets 2 attacks. So it's 3 dice against 3 dice. No re-rolls or modifications on these. So there are 2 matching 6s. So they have to roll off against one another. And the Anglo-Saxon wins it. So he is going to strike at the less well-armoured freeman, who has a defence of 3, 2 plus 1 for the shield, and he beats it. So the fight is going very badly for the Vikings. The freeman is killed and the raider gets pushed back an inch. Okay, now in the centre of the table, the Vikings have finally made contact with those Anglo-Saxon bowmen, so there's a number of fights here. We start off here with a Viking freeman rolling 1 dice with his spear, fighting a bowman who will also have 1 dice, but he's fighting with a knife, which is a free weapon, so he gets -1 to his hits. But even with -1, he still wins it. So that Viking has a defence of 3, 2 plus 1 for the shield, and he only gets a 3, so the Viking has to retire. Okay, so the Viking gets pushed back an inch, and then we're on to a Viking raider. I believe this guy is. Yeah. So he has an axe, which means the Vikings are axe specialists, so they get to re-roll 1 dice if they're using an axe. But he would be rolling, what's he got, axe and shield? He would be rolling 3 dice, 3 attack dice, and again the Anglo-Saxon's rolling 1, and he's got -1 to that dice roll. So you can't modify down to less than 1, but all of the dice have beaten him, so I'm not going to re-roll any of them. So the feared with the bow is in trouble because he's only got a defence of 2, and all 3 dice kill him. So he dies. Oops, not him though. And then we're on to Viking raider. Yeah, with a sword this time. So that means that he has 2 attack dice, but +1 to hit, against the bowman who has 1 attack dice, -1 to hit. So the 4 goes down to 3, and the 2 4s go up to 5. So they both wound, or they both hit. So again, we have to beat a defence of 2 and fail. Absolutely awful. I think this is the white dice, or the Viking dice, just rolling very badly. So this is the first time this has ever happened in a game of Brethren that I played, but you're meant to withdraw an inch, but he can't do, because he's blocked by this building. So that means you fight another round of melee. I just need to, but it's a desperation, so it's a particular effect on the dice roll. I'll just have to look up. Right, now I'm not entirely clear on the wording here. It says, when a unit becomes desperate and trapped in combat, the combat must be repeated until they defeat their opponent or they are killed. The desperate unit, this is the bowman, gets the following modifiers for the duration of them being trapped. First repeated combat, +1 attack, -1 defence. Now, I think that means +1 to the attack roll, not plus an additional attack dice. So, in other words, he's still rolling 1 attack dice, but instead of being -1, he's now on 0. That's the way I'm going to interpret it anyway. And then if this doesn't result in a kill or pushing the Viking back, then you modify it again. So the Viking is getting +1 to his hits. Yeah. So the Anglo-Saxon's on 2, 5 goes up to 6, 2 goes up to 3, so that's 2 successful hits. And now the defence has gone down by 1, so previously it was 2, so now it is only 1, so it should be pretty easy to kill him. Yeah, well, wasn't that easy. There's 1 2 there, so he dies. Okay, so that's another Anglo-Saxon casualty, and then there's another fight here between a raider with a spear and another bowman. So the raider with the spear has 2 attacks, and the the Anglo-Saxon only 1. But again, the Anglo-Saxon is -1 because he's fighting with a knife. So 3 goes down to 2, meaning that the 6 and the 4 have both beaten him, and he's got a defence of 2. And again, fails to hit, but again, can't move back. Oh, actually, I think he probably could, because it's this chap here. So I think we're going to move that chap back an inch and him back an inch. Okay, and then there's no more fighting there. Moving on then to the other flank, starting with this group here. So there is a housecarl with a Dane axe and a housecarl with a sword and shield against a Dane with a one-handed axe and a shield. So the Vikings are, or the Danes, whatever you want to call them, are axe specialists. So they get to he gets 3 dice and he gets to re-roll 1 of them. The Dane axe is 4 dice, and the sword is 2 dice, so I'm using a smaller dice for them because they add +1. Yeah, +1 to hit. Right, so I've got a 1 and a 1, so they go up to 2, so they're not going to cut it against that 6. And what did I say about? I said the Vikings get 1 reroll. So at the moment there are 2 6s matched against one another. So what I want to do is reroll 1 Viking dice and try and get another 6. And I do. Yeah, that's brilliant. Okay, so now these are straightforward roll, but I can re-roll 1 dice. So the 4 is matching that 4, the 5 is beating that 4. So I'll try and re-roll the 4, get higher, and I do. So I got 2 successful hits. So I am going to try those hits. First one against the housecarl with the Danax, because he has got slightly lower defence. So I need he's got a defence of 4 because he hasn't got a shield, so I need 5. And I get a 6, yeah, so he will be dead. And then the other one has a defence of 5 because he's got a shield, and I only get a 2. So the housecarl with the Danax is killed, and the one with the sword is pushed back an inch. Right, now here, this chap is in real trouble. He is a raider, Viking raider with a Danax, which will give him 4 dice. But no rerolls or anything like that. But he is fighting 2 housecarls with Danaxes, that's 8 dice, and another housecarl with a sword and a shield, so that is 2 dice adding +1 to hit. And there's also a support from a spear behind, so that is 9 dice for the Danaxes with no modifications, and 2 dice for the sword +1. Okay, so the 2 smaller dice for the sword, so the 3 goes up to 4 and the 5 goes up to 6. So the best the Viking could manage was 5, so there are 3 6s there, which means that there are 3 successful attacks. Okay, so the raider has a Danax, so although the figure's got a shield on its back, I'm not allowing the shield to be used. Normally this is what you see is what you get, but have to just use the models that I've got really. So he's only got a defence of 3, so 2 dice there kill him. Okay, so he dies. Then we'll move across to here. So again we've got a raider with a Danax, that would be 4 dice. And a sword and a shield, that would be 2 dice adding +1 again. And another housecarl with a Danax, so that will be 4 dice. So it's +1 to the little dice, no modifiers on the others. So 4 goes up to 5 and 3 goes up to 4. So there's one Viking dice at 5, but there is a 6 there. So the 6 wins it. So that's one successful attack. And again, the defense is only 3. So I've got to beat 3. No, I don't. Okay, so I think I'm going to allow him to move back an inch and just be in front of that shield wall there. And there are just 2 further fights to resolve, which are this chap here against that chap there, and the Viking is in a shield wall formation, which will improve his defence, but that will only come into effect if the Anglo-Saxon gets a successful hit against him. So it's another housecarl with sword and shield, which means 2 dice adding +1 to the hit, to the attack. And the Viking also has a sword and shield. Yep, so he is also 2 dice adding +1. I don't think there's any point, as they're both adding +1s, it makes no difference really. So they drew 3s, so you re-roll the 3s, and this time the 5 goes up to a 6 and beats the 2, which goes up to 3. So the Viking has a successful attack. So that housecarl's defence was 5, 4 +1 for the shield, and he gets 6. Yay, the Viking luck is just beginning to change a little. Okay, so that housecarl is killed, and then the only other fight is between a housecarl with a Dane axe and a freeman or a Bondi only armed with a spear. So we know that the housecarl with the Dane axe will get 4 attack dice. The Bondi with the spear only has 1 attack dice. Okay, so the 6 is a successful attack. The Vikings' defence is normally 3 +1. No, beg pardon. 2 +1 is 3, but he gets an additional 1 for being in a shield wall, so it's 4. So 5 or 6 will kill him. Yeah, it's a 6. So he dies as well. So I don't think there's any doubt that the Vikings lost that round. They've got more casualties, so I'll just count them up, and then we'll work out whether there will be a morale check to take. Okay, so in that turn the Vikings lost 9 dead and the Anglo-Saxons 5. So the Anglo-Saxons can demand a morale check on the Vikings, and they're going to use this same spot over here again, which is quite vulnerable. So this is the hero, measuring 6 inches from that to any other unit. Doesn't have to be an opponent's hero, but I'm going to choose the opponent's hero there because he has quite a large number of figures within 6 inches of him. So again, can't use that one-off ability, but the horn still does inspire fear. It's -1 now, to morale. So again, we're rolling 2 dice. I've got to get the morale or lower for them to stay on the table. So this chap here is a 10, so that goes down to 9, and I roll a 6, so he's fine. This chap here is a 10 going down to 9, and I roll 2, so he's fine. This chap here is an 8 going down to 7, and I roll 7. This one here is another 7, and I roll 6. This chap here is a 9, and I roll 10, so he leaves. This chap here is a 9, and I roll 4. This chap here is a 9, and I roll 5. This chap here is a 9, and I roll 9. And finally, fingers crossed for the hero, he is a 9, and I rolled a 5. So that time round they only lost 1 figure through morale. But they're still definitely losing figures at a faster rate than the Anglo-Saxons. Okay, another turn, and I've done all the movement again. There's a lot more fighting now to resolve. Things are not looking good for the Viking side though. In the movement phase they lost 1 casualty to arrows, but he happens to be another one of the support heroes, the hornblower, so a fear specialist, so I never got to use his ability in the game. And the standard as well, if you remember, was killed off very early. And down here there's this entire group of figures in Shield Wall who are just not involved really in the fighting. They don't need to be. So if the Vikings can manage to prevail in all this other fighting, then they've still got that final fortress almost to beat. So the Anglo-Saxons have a faction ability which allows them to turn shield walls into shield castles, which gives those figures even more defence than a normal shield formation. So anyway, we shall begin over that side there with a raider with a spear and a sword against a feared just with a spear. Okay, so the smaller white dice is the sword, to which we can add +1. So and we also get a re-roll. So let's re-roll the sword, because the Anglo-Saxon feared again as 1. Yeah, they win. Amazing. So his defense, the Vikings' defense, is 3. So he's dead. There we go. So he dies. And then we move on to yeah, I didn't do this properly before, but that should be there. And in fact, he should have. I didn't move those 2 figures, but he should have been there, giving him support. But he didn't need it in the end. Okay, so we now have 2 feared against a raider with a sword, and 2 spears in support. So the Anglo-Saxons will be throwing 4 dice and the raider is rolling 2 dice but adding 1 to his attacks. Okay, so you can't increase the 6 any higher, but the 5 can go up to a 6, and that means that we re-rolled all the 6s. So that's 2 successful Viking dice there. So the feared only have a defence of 3, I believe. Yep, 2 plus 1 for the shield. So 1 is killed and 1 isn't. Yeah, sorry, may not have been recording there, but I just moved back those Anglo-Saxons that hadn't died, that had been lost in that, and now I'm fighting here. So it's 2 dice adding +1 for the Viking against 2 dice, 1 for the spear and 1 for the supporting spear. Right, so the 1 goes up to a 2, and the Viking, the Anglo-Saxons only managed to roll 2 1s, so that's 2 successful hits, and trying to beat a defence of 3. Yeah, so I get 1 kill, but that's, I couldn't kill the supporting figure anyway, so this chap here dies. Next up we'll do Viking with a sword and shield against a feared with a spear. So it's 2 dice against 1, adding +1 to the Viking roll. So the 4 goes up to a 5, matching the Anglo-Saxon 5. And then the Anglo-Saxon has rolled 6, which means he wins, and he's got to beat a defence of 4. 3 plus 1 for the shield, and he doesn't. So that Viking gets pushed back an inch, and then we'll do this fight here, which is actually a single feared in the centre there, with Vikings attacking him from both sides. So we've got a Viking raider with a sword and shield, and a Viking raider with a spear and sword. Right, this is going to be complicated. So the Anglo-Saxons only going to have 1 dice. The raider with the sword and spear, sorry, with the, sword and spear, is going to have 2 attacks, one of which will have +1 to the hit. So we're going to say small dice is +1 to the hit, and he will get to re-roll one of those dice because he's got 2 weapons. And then we've also got another 2 swords, another 2 dice being thrown by the raider with the sword and shield with +1 to hit. So if there's no easy way of doing this. We'll have to do them separately, I think. Okay, so the Anglo-Saxon rolls a 6. The chap with the sword rolls a 5 and a 3, so that 5 goes up to a 6. And the chap with the spear and the sword is the smaller of the dice, rolls a 4, which doesn't beat the, and that goes up to a 4 as well, and he can re-roll it because it's two-handed and still doesn't get it. So there, at the end of all that, there is 2 6s matching one another. The 3 beats the 1 plus 1, so that's 3 beats 2. So even though he was surrounded fighting 2 Viking raiders, he is still 1. So he is going to choose to try and wound the raider with the sword and spear, who only has a defence of 3. And he does it. So he dies, and he has to pull back an inch. Okay, next up we have the Viking hero being supported by a spear against a housecarl with an axe. So the housecarl with the axe rolls 3 attacks, and the hero, who has a sword, has 3 attacks, plus 1 for the spear, 1 attack for the spear, and he's adding 1 to his dice rolls. So I've got to beat Anglo-Saxon 5, and those 2 5s there go up to 6s. So I've got 2 successful hits, and we've got to try and beat the housecarl's defence, which I think is 4. Housecarl with axe and shield. No, it's 5. He's got 4, but he's got 1 for the shield. So we've got to get 6s to kill him. And we foul. So he just gets pushed back an inch. And then we move on to here, which is a Bondi with a sword and a spear against a housecarl with an axe and a shield. So we know, I've forgotten already, that the axe is 3 attacks, 2 normally, but plus 1 for housecarl wielding an axe, and the Bondi with the sword and spear is only 1 attack, but he gets to re-roll it because he's got 2 hand weapons. Right, so I think I'm going to choose not to re-roll it, because the odds of it being 5 or 6 are less than if I re-roll these 2 and then re-roll it again. So I've still got to be at 4, but I think statistically that was a sensible thing to do. So still lose. So the Vikings' defence is only 2, and we only get a 2. So he survives. So we move the Viking back an inch, and then we've got another housecarl with an axe against, this time it's a raider with a spear. So I think that is 2 dice rather than 1. Yep, 2. So it's 3 against 2, no mods or anything. And the Vikings win that. They got 4 and a 1. The Anglo-Saxon only rolled 2s. So again, I think I've got to beat a defence of 5. Yep. And I get a 6, so we kill him. if I sound exciting at times by the successful Viking rolls, I think it's because I'm beginning to root for them, because they've had a lot of unlucky dice rolls. So I see them as the underdog. Okay, so that's all the fighting in that area there. So in the centre here, we have this bowman attacked by two Vikings. One has a axe, so he gets 3 dice, and he can re-roll one of them because the Danes are axe specialists, and the Freeman only gets 1 dice, so I use a smaller dice for him. He doesn't get any additional bonuses or anything, and the Anglo-Saxon is fighting with a knife, so he gets -1 to his dice roll. Right, so you can't reduce 1 down any lower. So everything beats, so there's no need to do a reroll. So I've got 4 successful attacks against him, and his defence I think is only 2. Yeah, 2. So as long as I don't get a 1, no, as long as I don't get a 1 or a 2 with any of these dice, yeah, 3 of them kill him. So he dies, and then we'll fight this raider with a sword against the feared members wielding a sort of club, which I'm treating as a mace. So he reduces the enemy's defence if he gets a successful hit, but he's only rolling 1 attack dice, whereas the Viking raider with the sword is rolling 2 attack dice and getting +1 to his hits. Yeah, so he gets 2 successful hits against the feared, who only again has... Oh, he's got a shield, so he will get a little bit of defence from that. So he gets 3 defence, so I've got to beat 3. And I do with the 6. So he dies. And then we've got a raider with a sword against an Anglo-Saxon fighting with a knife. So the Anglo-Saxon will have 1 dice on -1, and the raider with the sword gets 2 dice +1 to hit. So 2 goes down to 1. And the 1 goes up to 2. So both the attacks were successful. And he's got a defence of 2. So 1 dice kills him. So he dies. So a few more Anglo-Saxon casualties this turn. So it's looking a bit more promising for the Vikings. And then finally here we've got a raider with a spear against an Anglo-Saxon with a knife. So 1 dice for -1 for the Anglo-Saxon, and 2 attacks for the Viking, with no mod or anything like that. Right, so 2 successful dice for the Vikings, again having to beat a defence of 2. Yeah, so there's another Anglo-Saxon dead. So he dies. And over here the Anglo-Saxon battle priest has moved around to try and give some commands over here in the next turn, but isn't able to do anything further at the moment. And the Viking shield wall dispersed so that the figures all sort of charged into various combats over here. So we could start anyway really, but we'll start with that little group there, I think. So this is a Viking with an axe and shield, so that would be 3 dice. Re-rolling one of them against an Anglo-Saxon housecarl with a sword and shield. So that will be 2 dice with a +1 and another sword and shield, so that's another 2 dice with +1. So it's 3 dice with 1 re-roll against 4 dice with +1s. Right, so the 5 will go up to 6, the 2 will go up to 3, and the 3 will go up to 4. So all of the right, what I'm going to do is put the 3 against the 3 there, and then I'm going to re-roll one of these two to attempt to get a 6, otherwise I'm in trouble. No, only get a 1. Right, so that means that there are 3 successful dice there for the Anglo-Saxons, and that Viking raider with an axe and a shield has a defense of 4 +1 for the shield. So that's 5, so 6s will kill him. No, just 5s. So he gets pushed back an inch, and then this next one is a little bit convoluted. So we have a Viking raider with a sword and shield. So that's 2 attack dice +1 to hit, but he gets an additional attack dice for the spear supporting him. So the way I've been interpreting the rule is that he can add +1 to all those 3 dice. And he is fighting 2 housecarls with Dane axes, so they are 4 dice each. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then an additional 1 for the spear behind. Right, so +1s to the Viking roll, no mods to the Anglo-Saxons. So the 5 goes up to 6, the 4 goes up to 5. So as the Anglo-Saxons have some 6s there, we just take the 6s out and re-roll them. And again, the Vikings have +1, which is just as well, because the Anglo-Saxons rolled a 4, so that 4 can go up to 5, which means the Viking got 1 successful hit against the housecarls, so they both have defense of 4, because they're not carrying a shield, so they've got a 2-handed weapon in their hands, and I only get a 4. Right, so we have to move back an inch. And then we'll move on to the Viking hero, supported by a spear against a housecarl with a Dane axe. We know the housecarl with the Dane axe is 4 dice. The Viking hero is 3 dice, but +1s to hit. And he gets a 4th dice for the spear support. So it's 4 dice on +1 against 4 dice. Okay, so that 5 goes up to a 6. And the 2 and the 1 won't go up to anything enough to match the Anglo-Saxons dice, but it does mean there are 2 successful hits there. And again, we know that the housecarl's defence is 4. And again, we don't beat it. So the housecarl simply push back an inch. And then here we've got another, I think that's a Dane axe. Yep. Another housecarl with a Dane axe. So 4 dice. Against a Viking with raider with a sword, which is 2 dice +1 to hit. And an additional supporting dice from the spear. So it's 3 dice on +1 against 4 dice. 5 goes up to 6, and the 2 3s go up to 4s. So we have to re-roll the 2 6s that pair off. +1 to the white dice. Yeah, so it just does it. 6 against 5. And we have to beat a defence of 4. And this time we get 5. So we do manage to kill him. So he dies. And then there's just one last combat here, which is a Viking with a sword and shield against, supported by with a spear, against a housecarl with a sword and shield. So the Viking with the sword and shield has 2 attack dice +1 to hit, and gets an additional attack dice for the spear, so 3 dice +1 to hit. And the housecarl has 2 dice +1 to hit. So all the dice are +1 to hit. The Vikings have 3 against the Anglo-Saxons 2. So I don't suppose there's any. Oh no, we'll see. I was going to say I don't suppose there's any point in adding the +1s because it all evens out. So the 3 and the 4 definitely beat 2 1s. Okay, so 2 successful hits, and this time the defence will be 5 because it's 4 plus an additional 1 for the shield. And I don't beat it. So he gets pushed back 1 inch. Right, now I'm just going to count up the bodies. I think that was more even in terms of casualties inflicted this time. So we'll see which side came out on top. Okay, the Vikings definitely won that round. Inflicted 8 casualties on the Anglo-Saxons against 3 sustained. So up this end of the table, there are no kind of benefits for the Anglo-Saxons in terms of morale. Up the other end, there's a couple of standards. The battle priest and the standard can both boost morale. So we're going to stay out of their area, and I'm going to ask the Anglo-Saxons to take a morale check based on a figure 6 inches from this hero here. So I'm going to pick this feared here, and anything within 6 inches of him, which is all of this area here, all the Anglo-Saxons in that area have to take a morale check. Okay, so the morale it's not going to be increased or decreased by horns or standards or anything like that. So it's either going to be 10 for the more the better class troops, or 7 for the feared. Okay, so we'll start with this feared here, and I rolled a 6, so he's okay. This one here, and I rolled a 7, so he's okay. This one here, and I rolled a 6. This one here, 3. This one here, 3. They're doing well. This one here, 6. Oh, I don't believe this. This one here, 3. This guy here is a 10. And I roll a 9. And this chap here is a 10. And I rolled a 3. And I think that is everything. So they've survived. So battery on the camera is beginning to run a little bit low now, so I think I'll stop there and recharge the battery before I make the next moves. Right then, another turn. Thing that's noticeable now that I remarked on a previous Batrep for Brethren is that it's been this really bloody battle, but when you remove the figures, there's nothing to kind of indicate that. So the table's getting sparser. It's still looking relatively crowded, but I really need to move on with painting up a lot of casualty figures just to put down on the table. So it'll give you a much more visual impression of the sort of fight that's gone on already. But anyway, that's something I've got to get around to doing. So lots of combats to resolve again. So let's start down in this corner here, this side here. So here we have 3 Anglo-Saxon feared against a Viking raider with a sword and shield, and they're supported by 2 other spears behind. So that's 5 dice that the Anglo-Saxons are throwing, and the Viking raider I think throws 2. Yeah, 2 with +1 to hit. Terrible roll for the Vikings. So those 2 1s go up to 2 2s, but they are still insufficient to beat the 6 and the 5. So 2 successful attacks for the Anglo-Saxons, and the Viking Raiders' defence is 3 +1 for the shield, so got to get 5 or 6, and we get a 5 and a 6, so he's killed twice over. Okay, so he falls dead, and we move on to the next combat. So we'll do this pair off here between a Viking raider with a sword and shield against a feared with a spear and shield. So it's 2 dice for the Vikings, +1 to hit, and 1 dice for the Anglo-Saxon feared. And yep, the Vikings got a successful hit there. So the defence of the feared is 2 +1 for the shield. And we only get a 2. Okay, so the feared just gets pushed back an inch, and then we'll do this fight here, which is an Anglo-Saxon feared being attacked by 2 Viking raiders both with swords and shields. So if this doesn't get a kill, I don't know what will. Okay, +1 to the Viking dice. So that goes up to 3, that goes up to 3, so there are 3 successful hits there. And again, it's a defense of 3. And the 4 kills him. So he dies. And then we'll move on to the Viking hero here, supported by a spear, attacking a housecarl with an axe and shield. Okay, the Viking is rolling a total of 4 dice, +1 to hit, and the Anglo-Saxons rolling 3 dice. So, that 5 goes up to a 6. And nothing else can match the Anglo-Saxon 6, so there are 2 6s to re-roll here. White dice gets +1, but fails to beat the Viking throw. So fails to beat the Anglo-Saxon throw. So the Anglo-Saxons have a successful hit on the Viking hero, and he has got a defense of 4 +1. And yeah, that's 1. Luckily for him, he's got another 2 health, because he's got 3 health altogether. But he does suffer 1 loss of health. So they get pushed back an inch, and we put 1 wound marker on the Viking, and then we move on to this fight here, which is another Anglo-Saxon housecarl with an axe and shield against a Bondi this time. Yeah, Bondi with a spear and sword, supported by another Bondi with a spear. So the Anglo-Saxon has got 3 dice. The Bondi has only got 1, but let's see, he can re-roll. Yeah, he can hang on, sword and yeah, he can re-roll 1 dice, so he can re-roll 1 attack dice, but he gets an extra attack dice for the spear supporting him. So it's 3 against 2 with 1 re-roll for the Vikings too. Okay, so the Anglo-Saxons got 6, 2 and 3. So the 3 eliminate the 3 and 2 of the Anglo-Saxon. We've got to roll again and try and get a 6, and we fail. So the Anglo-Saxon has a successful hit on the Freeman, who has a defense of 2. And we get a 6, so he's killed. Okay, so Vikings once again not doing terribly well in the actual combat. Okay, now over here, a Viking raider has made contact with the Anglo-Saxon support hero, who is carrying a standard and defended with a shield, but that means that he's fighting with a knife. So he gets 2 attack rolls, but -1 to his rolls, whereas the Viking, because the Vikings are axe specialists, they get 3 attack rolls and can re-roll 1 of those 3. Right, so what I'm going to do is that 3 is going to eliminate the Anglo-Saxons' Oh no, hang on. That three there goes down to a 2, which means currently the Viking has 2 successful attacks, and he can re-roll this one, and he gets third attack. Okay, so the Anglo-Saxon support hero has a defense of 3 plus 1 for the shield. So we've got 1 successful wound on him, but he's got 2 health, so he takes a wound marker as well. Okay, so the Anglo-Saxon has to retreat an inch and takes a wound marker, and then we'll move on to just here where we have a Anglo-Saxon bowman, so he'll be fighting with a knife against a Viking Bondi with a spear and shield. So it's 1 attack dice each, but the Anglo-Saxon is on -1. So even on -1, still manages to get a successful hit against the Viking. And with a spear and a shield, that means he's got a defense of 3, and he only rolls a 1, so he doesn't kill him. So the Viking gets pushed back an inch, and then we move on to this fight here between a Viking raider with a sword, which gives him 2 attacks plus 1 to hit, and the Anglo-Saxon is afeared with a club, so he only gets 1 attack dice, but he reduces the enemy defense down if he does get a successful hit. So again, even with +1 to the Vikings roll, they still don't beat the Anglo-Saxon 6, and because he's using a club, he reduces the enemy defense down by 1. So normally the Viking raider would have a defense of 3 plus 1 for the shield. He loses the defense of 1, so he's got a defense of 3, but he's not killed. So the Viking moves back an inch, and then we move on to here, which is another Anglo-Saxon with a bow, so 1 dice attacking with a knife, so -1, against a Viking Bondi with a spear, so that would be 1 attack, and a Viking raider with a sword, so that will be 2 attacks plus 1 to hit. Okay, so the spear, Viking spear, is a smaller white dice, so that 4 goes up to a 5, that 4 comes down to 3, which means that doesn't count, so it's too low. So the Vikings have got 2 successful hits, and the Anglo-Saxon only has a defense of 2. So he's killed twice over. So the Anglo-Saxon dies, and then we move on to this one here next, I think. So this is a Viking raider with an axe. So he gets 3 dice in total, plus a re-roll on 1 of them, and against 2 housecarls with swords. So they have 2 attack dice each, with +1 on their attack dice. Yeah, that's right. Right, so we have a 5, a 5, a 6, which will match that Viking 6. So actually none of these are relevant because the 6 negates them all, but the Vikings do get a reroll, see if they can get another 6. No. So there were 2 dice to re-roll, and the Anglo-Saxons had 1. So the Anglo-Saxons just get it. And the Viking Raiders' defence is 3. No, it's not, it's 4. Five actually. Viking Raider, axe and shield, 4 + 1 defence. I might have that wrong actually. That's something I might have been playing that wrong, because normally a Viking Raider's defence is 3 + 1 4 defence. So I'll just check that, but I might have got that wrong on my notes. Yeah, I've been playing that wrong all the game. If I have, he should only have a total defence of 4. And he's killed. Okay. So he's killed, and then moving along the line here, we have a Viking Raider. I'm describing him as a raider, even though he's not wearing armour, but I'm counting. I've given him points for being armoured. So a Viking Raider with a spear and sword against the house skull with a Dane axe. Yeah, so the Viking Raider with the sword and spear gets 2 attacks, +1 to hit for the sword. So I'll use a larger dice for the sword, and he will get to re-roll 1 of those because he's got 2 weapons, 1 in each hand, and the Anglo-Saxon has a total of 4 dice. Okay, so +1 to the larger white dice makes that 3, and the Anglo-Saxons have got a 6 there, so what I'm going to do is keep that 5 to negate all the other blue ones and re-roll this in the hope of getting a 6. And we do, yeah. Right, so we can re-roll both of those, adding +1 to the Viking roll. Still not enough. So he doesn't have a shield, so he's only got a defence of 3. But the Anglo-Saxon only scores 2. Right. So Viking moves back an inch, and then the next fight is a little bit more complicated. We've got the Anglo-Saxon battle priest, who will be fighting with a knife. Does get 4 attacks though, so you get 4 attacks with a -1, and then there's a housecarl with a Dane axe, so he'll have another 4 dice. So I'll need a different sized dice for him. Okay, so I'm using smaller dice for the battle priest, got 4 dice for the housecarl, but he's got a spear support behind him, so he's rolling 5 dice. And the Viking raider has got a sword, so he is rolling 2 dice with +1s to hit, but also gets an additional dice for the spear support behind. Okay, so it's -1 to all the smaller dice, so the 6 goes down to 5, if I can find it. The 4 goes down to 3. The 1 can't go down any further, but the 3 goes down to 2. The Vikings, I think I said, yeah, +1 to hit. So 4 goes up to 5. 4 goes up to 5. And 2 goes up to 3. So the outcome of all that is that there is 1 dice there which is a 6, so that wins. So it's just 1 successful dice from the Anglo-Saxons. So they need to beat a defence of 4, 3 + 1 for the shield, and they don't. Okay, so the 2 Vikings are just pushed back an inch. And then next we have an Anglo-Saxon with a Danax, so he's going to have 4 dice with no adjustments against the hero, Viking hero, who has 3 attack dice +1 to hit, and another Bondi, I think he is. Oh no, he's got armour on. So he's a raider. So he gets 2 dice +1 to hit, and there's also a spear behind, giving another dice. Okay, so it's +1 to all the Viking dice. So we need to match 5, so those 2 4s will go up to 5. But there is a 6 there, so there's 1 successful Viking attack, and the housecarl's defence is 3. Doesn't have a shield because he's got a double-handed weapon, and he's not killed. I think I'm going to allow him to retreat rather than saying his way is blocked, because there is a sort of gap there. So he moves back an inch, and then there's 1 final combat to resolve, which is here, which is a housecarl with a sword against a raider with a sword, supported by a spear. So the housecarl with the sword has 2 attack dice +1 to hit. The Viking raider with the sword has 2 attack dice +1 to hit, but he gets extra dice for the spear behind. So it's 3 dice against 2, adding +1s. So the Anglo-Saxon wins that with 1 successful attack dice, and he's got to beat a defence of 4, because it'll be 3 + 1 for the shield, and fails. Okay, so the Vikings push back an inch. Right, I'm just going to do a quick look at how many casualties there are. I've got a feeling that it's another Viking loss for that turn. Well, it was close. It was 3 Viking dead, 2 Anglo-Saxon dead. So the Vikings have to take a morale check, and once again we're going to do it over this end here because there's this fear specialist here. So this is the hero. He's going to select the Viking hero as the centre, so 6 inches around him. That guy's a Viking there. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 figures that need to take morale checks, and the fear specialist is going to reduce their morale down by 1. So this chap's going to be 9, and we rolled an 8, so he's okay. This chap is also a 9. We rolled a 3. This chap will be a 7. And we rolled a 9, so he comes off. This chap is a 9. Oh, we rolled a 10. So the hero retreats. This chap here is a 7. We rolled a 10 again. This chap here is a 9 rather, and we rolled a 7. This one is a 9, and we rolled a 10. Oh, this is another bad morale round, and another 9, and we rolled an 11. So that was a disaster. I mean, I think the Vikings have been really unlucky with their dice rolls in this game. Because when you think in the one turn that they won, nothing came off in the Anglo-Saxon morale check, and they've just lost another 5 figures. It's getting close to them losing the game, I think. I'll just do a little bit of summation. Don't think they're quite there yet. Okay, well the Vikings are down to 14 figures now, and they need to be reduced down to 9 for the Anglo-Saxons to claim victory. So I'm going to carry on. It's highly unlikely that they can swing the battle now, but just going to see what happens to see how likely that kind of change of circumstances might occur in these rules. So we're going to run another turn. Okay, the Vikings are going to have to pull the stops out if they want to swing this game now. This might well be the last turn if the Anglo-Saxons manage to kill off, what would it be, 5 Vikings. So here, starting here, we have a Viking raider with a sword who gets 2 attack dice plus 1 to hit, and he's fighting 2 feared with spears, so they get 1 attack dice each, but there's 1 also supporting, so it's 3 dice against 2 plus 1s to hit for the Vikings. Okay, so that 2 goes up to a 3. What's that give us? So Anglo-Saxons got a 5, so the 6 is a successful hit against feared. Have a defense of 2 plus 1 for the shield, and they kill 1 of the feared. Okay, so 1 feared dies. The other 2 move back an inch, so that's a promising start. And then here we have very similar thing again. In fact, the identical thing again. So it'll be 2 Viking dice plus 1 against 3 Anglo-Saxon dice. And the highest the Vikings are going to get is 3, whereas there is a Anglo-Saxon 5 there. So one successful hit from the Anglo-Saxons, and they need 4. Well, they need higher than 4. They need the Viking had defense of 3 plus 1 for the shield, so he's not killed. He's just pushed back. So he gets pushed back an inch, and then we'll do this fight here. So this is Anglo-Saxon housecarl with an axe against a raider with a spear and another raider with a sword. So the raider with the spear gets 2 attacks. The raider with the sword gets 2 attacks plus 1 to hit. So we'll need 2 different sized dice for that. So the Anglo-Saxon with the axe housecarl with an axe gets 3 attacks, no modifiers, so it's 4 dice against 3 plus 1s on the larger dice. So that 3 will go up to that to match that 4, so we have to re-roll those 2 dice. Plus 1 to the, well, the 6 can't be put up any higher. So 1 successful hit from the Vikings, and the Anglo-Saxons' armour is, yeah, this is why I think I made the mistake earlier on the raider that the housecarls you pay more points for, and they have a slightly higher defence. So he has a defence of 4 plus 1 for his shield, so I've got to get a 6 to kill him, and I fell. Okay, so he gets pushed back an inch, and then we fight this fight here, which is the same again from the Anglo-Saxon point of view. So it's 3 dice without any modifiers. And the Viking hero gets 3 attack dice plus 1 to hit, and there's a spear supporting him behind, so 4 attack dice, which I'm interpreting as being plus 1 to hit, as I have done all through the game. Yeah, it's not going the Vikings' way. So there are 2 5s there that I can't match. So 2 successful hits. This might be enough to kill the Viking hero, I don't know. He's got a defense of 5, so 6s will wound him. No. The Vikings just get pushed back then. And that wound marker is on the hero. Right, moving across the table. Okay, so here we have a Viking raider with an axe against an Anglo-Saxon bowman who'd be fighting with a knife. So that he has 1 dice minus 1, and the Viking raider with the axe has 3 attack dice and gets to re-roll 1 of them. So that 3 goes down to a 2, and I'm not going to bother to re-roll because there's 3 successful hits there. So I have to beat a defense of 2. Yeah, it's killed. So he dies. And then here we have a Viking raider with a sword against another Anglo-Saxon bowman. So the Anglo-Saxon will be 1 dice minus 1. And the raider with a sword is 2 attack dice plus 1 to hit. Just so that's this right here. Right, so that goes up to 4. So 2 successful hits again. Defense of 2. Yeah, he's killed as well. So this is quite useful to the Vikings, because the more of these sort of lower grade troops they can kill, the more, you know, it just adds to the casualty figure. So it improves their chances of forcing the Anglo-Saxons to make a morale check. Okay, here we have another bowman fighting with a knife against a raider with a sword. So it's 2 attack dice for the raider, plus 1 to hit. Okay, so that 3 goes down to a 2. And the 2 goes up to a 3. 3 goes up to a 4, so 2 successful hits, one of which inflicts a wound. So the Anglo-Saxon is killed, and then we move on to here, which is another Anglo-Saxon feared, fighting with a club or a mace this time. So if I remember rightly, he still only gets 1 attack dice, but if he succeeds he reduces the enemy defence. And then there's a Bondi with a spear, so that'd be 1 dice. A raider with a spear, that's 2 attack dice, so there are 3 attack dice against 1. No rerolls or anything, so the 6 tops everything. So the this particular Anglo-Saxon does have a shield, so he's got a defence of 3, which the Vikings fail to match. So the Anglo-Saxon just has to withdraw. Try and keep those separate. Withdraw 1 inch, and then we'll go across to over here, and we'll start with 2 housecarls with swords. Is I think they're 2 dice each. Yeah, 2 attacks each, plus 1 to hit, against a Viking raider with a sword and a spear. So he gets 2 attack dice, plus 1 to hit for the sword, and he can re-roll 1 of those dice because he's got 2 weapons, 1 in each hand. Right, so the sword goes up to 6, which means that it matches all the blue ones can have plus 1 added to them, but none of them are therefore going to match the 6 other than the already thrown 6 there. But this one I can re-roll to attempt to get a 6 with it. No, so we just re-roll these 2, adding +1 to both, so the Vikings win. So the Anglo-Saxon armour for both of those housecarls will be 5, and we only rolled a 4. Okay, so the Viking did win the melee, so the housecarls have to withdraw an inch, and then we've got a fight here between a Viking raider with a sword. So he has 2 attack dice, +1 to hit, whereas there are 2 housecarls attacking him both with Dane axes, so they're going to roll a total of 4 dice each, so that's a total of 8. Okay, +1 to the white dice. So 3 would go up to 4, but there are loads of 6s there that need to be re-rolled, matching one another. So again, it would be +1 to the white dice. So that would match the 3. So there are 2 successful hits from the Anglo-Saxons, and the Viking raider has a defence of 4. So there's a 2 and a 4 there, so no kill. So the Viking gets pushed back. This is promising because at the moment I think the Vikings have inflicted more casualties. Okay, so the last conflict is here, and it's another Viking raider with a sword. Oh gosh. I think that guy is an Anglo-Saxon. We're calling. They do look very similar, some of the figures. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he was. So the Vikings have 2 attack dice, +1 to hit. There are 4 dice for the Dane axe there, plus another one for the spear support, and then the Anglo-Saxon with the sword, housecarl with the sword, has 2 attack dice, +1 to hit. Okay, so the 2 small blue dice and the 2 white dice are +1s to hit. So 5 goes up to 6. 2 goes up to 3, but that's not going to matter. And that goes up to 2 and to 5. So it's just these 2 6s here that we need to re-roll. And the white dice gets +1. But it's not enough to beat the 4. So the Anglo-Saxons win that melee, win that fight. And the Viking Raiders' armour is going to be a total of 4. And we rolled a 5, so he's killed. It's unfortunate for him. Right, so he falls dead as well. I'm just going to do the same again and count up the casualties on each side. Okay, now the Vikings definitely won that turn, so they inflicted 4 casualties against 1 in return. But the only hero they have left on the table, they've lost 2 support heroes and 1 combat hero. They're left with 1 combat hero, so you have to call the morale from here. So there's no getting around that, and unfortunately the Vikings, the Anglo-Saxons have moved their inspiration support hero to here, and he is just within 6 inches. So regardless of the fact that he adds +1 to the morale of all the figures within 12 inches of him, I'm going to call him the centre for the morale check, and every figure within 6 inches of him, which is all but those 3 there in the shield wall. Actually, possibly those 2 aren't within 6 inches of him either. No, that one. So there are 4 figures in the shield wall not within 6 inches of him. But everything else, those 2, all the shield wall and the hero and himself, obviously, all need to take a morale check, but it will be, their morale will be boosted by the presence of that standard. So let's get going with that. So this guy here, morale of 11 now, and I roll a 9. That chap there is 11, and I roll a 7. That chap there is an 8 now, and I roll a 7. I think I'm calling him an 11. I'm going to call him an 8. It should be what you see is what you get, and he's not armed. Well, he is armoured because he's got a helmet. Yeah, so he's going to be a housecarl. I rolled a 9. Same with him. Rolled a 10. Same with him. 8. Same with him. No. Same with him. No. 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 And this guy is an 8. 7. No. I think I said that one was going to be included. No. Okay, here's an 11. 9. And the standard bearer himself. No. So nothing comes off in terms of morale. Don't think it would have done anyway, even with the presence of that standard. I think if he'd not been there, I think I didn't roll high enough to remove anyone either. So that is the end of that turn. So I'm going to press on again, because that was a more successful turn for the Vikings. Right, well, the Anglo-Saxons have reduced their shield wall here now, and a lot of the members of the shield wall have left it to take part in these fights, because clearly the battle is going their way, so they just need to add numbers to the actual fighting and kill off the last few Vikings that are required to get them down to 20% of their total. So we're going to start resolving the combat up this end here. So here we have a Viking raider fighting 2 feared with spears, supported by another one with spears. So the Anglo-Saxons will be rolling 3 dice, and the Viking raider, I think it's 2 with +1s to hit. Okay, so that 5 goes up to match the Anglo-Saxon 6. So we re-roll those, and the Vikings win. So they have to beat a defence. I'm gonna try and. There's one feared member who hasn't got a shield, so he's only going to have a defence of 2. Yep, he's dead. So he dies. The other 2 pull back an inch, and then there's same again here. Viking raider with a sword, so he'll be 2 dice +1s, and he's fighting 2 Anglo-Saxons with spears. Sorry, couldn't quite see that there. 2 Anglo-Saxon feared with spears against a Viking raider with a sword. +1s to the white dice. So the 6 wins, and this will be a defence. Again, there's another one without a spear there, without a shield, so he's only got defence of 2, so he dies. Okay, so this chap moves back, this chap dies, and then we'll move on to this fight here, which is a Viking raider with a spear and a Viking raider with a sword against a housecarl with a Dane axe. No, sorry, a housecarl with an axe. So the Viking raider with the spear has 2 attack dice. The raider with the sword has 2, but with +1. And then the housecarl with the axe has 3 attack dice and gets an additional dice for the spear supporting him. So it's going to be +1 to the 2 larger white dice. Well, that was pretty awful. So the 6 and the 5 are going to prevail. So it's 2 successful attacks. Both have armour of 4, because they've both got shields. I don't get a 4, I don't get a 5 with either. Okay, so the 2 Vikings withdraw an inch, and then we'll resolve this fight next to them, which is another housecarl with an axe. So I think, yeah, he was 3 attack dice. He gets an additional attack dice for the spear supporting him, and he's fighting the combat hero, Viking combat hero, who has 3 attack dice +1s with an additional dice for the spear supporting him. So it's +1s to the Viking white dice, but not to the blue Saxon dice. Right, so we've got to get 6s because the Anglo-Saxons have got a6 there, so it's 1 6 on each side. +1s to the white dice again. Yep, they've done it. So the housecarl's defence is 5. 4 +1 for the shield. And we only roll a 2. So the Vikings aren't being killed at the moment. So at the moment they're winning the turn. Right, here we have a Viking raider with an axe. So he gets 3 dice and gets to reroll 1 of them against the Anglo-Saxon support hero, who has 2 attacks, but he's only fighting with a knife, so -1 to his dice roll. Right, so that 4 goes down to a 3. So the 5 is definitely going to beat that, but I can re-roll one of these 1s to see if I can get a 4 or a 5 as well. I do, yeah, so 2 successful attacks from the Vikings, and that inspiration specialist has a defense of 4, so no kill. Okay, if you think you can hear an air raid siren, you can. It's 11:30 on a Monday morning, and the dockyard always tests their radiation emergency alarm at this time. So just moving him back 1/2 inch. Okay, and then there's another fight going on here, if I can work out this. So I think he is an Anglo-Saxon. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he is. So we've got 3 Anglo-Saxon housecarls with spears. So that's 2 attack dice each, but no bonuses or anything like that. Fighting a Viking raider with a sword. He gets 2 attack dice but +1s to hit. So that 4 goes up to a 5. But the crucial thing is that there are some 6s here, so we have to re-roll those. +1 to the white dice. Doesn't beat the Anglo-Saxon 6. So the Viking with the sword, the raider with the sword, has a defense of 4 and he's killed. Right, so he was outnumbered, chopped down. Okay, and moving along, there's another fight here where the odds are more in favour of the Vikings. So they have an Anglo-Saxon feared fighting with a mace, or a club, so he gets 1 attack dice, and he's fighting a Viking raider with a spear, so he gets 2 dice, and a Viking raider with a sword, so he gets 2 dice +1 to hit, and an additional dice for being supported by a spear behind. Okay, so it's +1 to the larger white dice, none of which helps, but the 6 there tops everything. So we have to beat a defense of 3, and we fail to. So the Anglo-Saxon survives and just retreats 1 inch. Okay, and over here the last 2 surviving Vikings are about to be overwhelmed. There's 1 here and 1 here. So we'll start with this one here. So it's a Viking raider with a sword and a spear. So he gets 2 attack dice +1 to hit for the sword, and he is fighting a housecarl with a Dane axe, so that is 4 dice, and 2 housecarls with swords, so they are 2 attack dice each +1s to hit. Okay, so all the large dice, whether they're white or blue, get +1. Right, so they are all sixes. That's another six there. That's another six. Oh no, that's not +1. Right, so we've got to re-roll all of these. +1s again to the larger dice. So again, they will all go up to sixes. These can come up. So it's +1 to everything now. And the Viking, oh what hero, prevails. So he is going to try and inflict a wound on the Anglo-Saxon with the Danish, because he has a slightly lower defence of 4. And he gets a 5, yeah, so he manages to bring one of the Anglo-Saxons down. Okay, so that Anglo-Saxon dies, and the other two have to pull back an inch. And then we've got another outnumbered Viking here. So Viking raider with a sword gets 2 attack dice +1 to hit. And you know what, it doesn't matter anyway because the Viking won that melee, but I think I forgot to re-roll one of his dice for being 2 wet-handed weapons. Never mind. Right, so 2 dice +1s to hit against 3 dice for the Anglo-Saxon household with... oh no. It's 2 dice +1 to hit for the house skull with the sword and shield, but then there are also 2 house skulls with Dane axes, so that's another 8 dice plus another 1 for the spear. Right, so it's +1 to the white dice and +1 to the 2 smaller blue dice. So the 2 4s are only going to go up to 5s, so they're not going to be able to match these 6s. And that 5 also goes up to a 6. So there are 3 successful attacks from the Anglo-Saxon point of view. And the Viking raider has a defence of 4. Oh, there's little dice there left in the tray. Yeah, so he gets killed. Okay, so just check the casualties again, but I think the Vikings just marginally came out on top that turn, but they are getting perilously close to being depleted to the point where they surrender anyway. Okay, yeah, it was 3-2 in the Vikings' favour, so the Vikings can impose a morale check on the Anglo-Saxons. So once again, we have to do it over this side of the table. So I'm going to select the standard bearer again, even though he does give a bonus to the morale of all the Anglo-Saxons around him. So it's either 10 or 7 morale on the Anglo-Saxon side, so that's going to get boosted up to either 11 or 8. So we'll start here. It's everything from 6 inches, so it's all but the end figures on the shield wall. We'll start here. He would be an 11. 8. He would be an 11. 7. He would be an 11. 9. Basically I've got to roll a 12 now in order for them to come off the table. No, here's a Viking. No, no, no. Here's another 12 I need. No. Right then, some of these, he would be an 8. Oh, yeah, he does. Comes off. He would be an 8. No. He would be a 12. Yes, rolled a double 6. He would be a 12. No. He would be an 8. No. He would be an 8. No. He would be an 8. No. And what am I calling him? I think he's an 8. Yeah. No. Right, so 2 came off from morale. I think that's way too little, too late to save the Vikings, but we're going to play another round anyway. Okay, so the Vikings only have to lose another 2 figures now to have lost the game. So if that happens during this turn, I'll call it a day then. Otherwise, we'll go through the same process of working out morale and that kind of thing at the end of this turn. So starting off here, we have Viking with a sword, who will be rolling 2 dice plus 1s. Yep. Against a feared with a spear supported by another feared with a spear. So that's 2 dice against 2, but the Vikings get +1 to their dice roll. So both of those get +1, so they beat the Anglo-Saxon 4. And then it's 3 defence to overcome, fail. So the 2 Anglo-Saxons could just move back an inch. And then we have Viking with a sword again, so 2 with +1s to the dice roll against a feared on his own 1 dice. Oh, and the feared has got a 6, which will beat even those with +1. So the Raiders' defence is going to be 4. Yeah, 3 + 1 for the shield. Doesn't get killed. So he moves back ½ an inch, and then we'll deal with this fight here next, which is an Anglo-Saxon with an axe versus a Viking with a sword. Both are supported by a spear. So the Anglo-Saxon with the axe gets 3 attack dice, whereas but he gets +1. He gets +1 for the spear, so he gets 4 attack dice, and the Viking only gets 2 attack dice +1 for the spear, but he gets +1s to his dice roll. Right, so the highest the Vikings have got is, the Anglo-Saxons have got is 4. So that 4 will go up to a 5, beating everything else. So the Anglo-Saxon armour is 4 + 1 for the shield, and we only get a 1. So there's just room for them to pull back. there. I'll just change the camera angle so you can see the next conflict. Okay, so here we have the Viking hero against Housecarl with an axe, both supported by spears. Okay, so that works out at 4 attack dice each, but the Vikings get to add +1 to their dice roll. So again, the Anglo-Saxons have got a 6, and so have the Vikings, and nothing else can be, you can't add +1 to any of those and make 6, so it's just re-rolling those 2 dice with a +1 to the white dice. Yeah, so the white dice wins it. And again, they've got a beta armour of 5. No. So again, pull back. There's just about room for them to move back an inch there. And next up, it'll be this single solitary Viking here who is surrounded now. So it's a Viking raider with an axe against the standard bearer, Housecarl with a spear, another Housecarl with a spear, a Fyrd with a spear, and 2 spears in support. Right, so I make that 3 Viking dice with 1 reroll allowed, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, or 9 rather, Anglo-Saxon dice, but 2 of them, the 2 smaller ones, are -1. Right, so that 6 goes down to a 5. So we can effectively take out everything that isn't a 6 and re-roll one of those white ones in the hope of getting a 6 as well. No. So we're just re-rolling these 6s, adding +1 to the white dice. Are we? Yeah. No, hang on. No, it's just a straightforward re-roll, but I can re-roll it again. Right, so I'm going to. So I've got to try and beat that 5. No. So the Viking have to see if they're wounded, and they have an armour of 4. And we get a 5, yeah, so the Viking comes down. Okay, so that Viking there who's been surrounded is cut down and killed. So that's the first of 2 possible casualties needed to end the game. Okay, so here we have a single solitary Fyrd against 2 Viking raiders, one of which is supported by a spear. So it's 5 Viking dice, 3 of which add +1 against 1 Anglo-Saxon dice. So that 5 goes up to a 6, beats the Anglo-Saxon 5, so it's 1 successful hit, and he's got a defense of 3, and we get a 5, so he's killed. Right, so that Anglo-Saxon is killed, and then we're on to the last bit of combat in this turn, and this may well be the second Viking casualty here, because there's a single solitary Viking totally surrounded by housecarls. So there's going to be a tremendous number of dice rolled here against him. Okay, I won't go through all the arithmetic. There are basically 15 Anglo-Saxon dice versus 2 Viking. Mixture of large and small dice. All of the large dice add +1, and the Viking dice, they have, because he's fighting with a weapon in each hand, he can re-roll one of the dice. Right, so we can concentrate on just the 6s. So there are 3 6s there. The large dice all add +1, so there's not going to be any 6s there. And the Vikings can re-roll one of these dice, so they're going to re-roll the one that is +1 in an attempt to get either a 5 or a 6. No, so there are 3 successful rolls against the Viking. Just got to check what his armour is again, because he doesn't have a shield. So his defence is going to be a little bit lower. Yeah, his defence is only 3. So if any of these dice are 4 or above, he is killed. Yep, there's a 6 and a 5 there. So he dies. Right, not surprisingly then, he's surrounded by so many housecarls. That Viking is killed, and that means that the Viking force is down to only 9 figures, which is 20% of their starting strength, so they lose the game. Right, there we are. Just give you a little view from the distance of the battlefield as it ended. Few things to say, really. One is that the Vikings were disadvantaged in a way right from the start, because I although I costed the armies out, I didn't worry too much about the points values, and their force was slightly weaker than the Anglo-Saxon one, so they were handicapped from the start. And I do have some other figures that I could have added to the army, but I just didn't feel that I wanted to, almost from an aesthetic point of view. You can have berserkers in the army, and I've got about 6 berserker figures, and they would have certainly bumped the points value of the army up. But I'm not keen on the figures. They're the War Games Foundry figures. They look to me a little bit kind of, I don't know, cartoonish and sort of almost cliched in a way. So I did without them, but they might well have swung the battle had I included them. But I didn't think it was appropriate to have berserkers in what was supposed to be the original raid on the coast of Wessex in 789. So the other thing in terms of the presentation was that you can see, that area in front of you should really be littered with bodies, and I think visually the impact of the game would be much better if I did have a lot of casualty figures, which I have started to paint, but I need a lot, and it's going to take me a long time to build up a convincing number of casualty figures. But I think that would help in the presentations of the games going forward. And in terms of the rules themselves, you already know that I'm a big fan of them. They are. This is the upper end of the kind of scale of game that you could play using the rules, and as a result, it does get a little bit more mentally strenuous, if you like, and that you have to keep in, bear in mind all the different factors for the different weapon types. Not only that, but the same weapon can have a different statistic depending on the faction that is using it. So, for instance, axes. The Vikings are deemed to be an axe specialist, so a single-handed axe in the hands of a Viking is rolls better than a one in the hands of a Viking, of a Anglo-Saxon. Things like that. The specialities of the heroes. You have to keep all those in mind, and different factions have different abilities. So it does get a little, until you get really conversant with the rules, does get a little bit hard to keep it all in mind. So no doubt I did make a few mistakes, and also I do feel that in the way the rules are written, there are still kind of gaps that leave it open to the reader to interpret how the game should be played. For instance, I've never been entirely sure whether the figures have a 360-degree view, or whether if they are attacked from behind, they should, they should have a lower defence, for instance. I don't think they should, but then again, there is a rule about attacking a shield wall from behind that reduces the shield wall's defence. So it's kind of a little bit obscure. Doesn't worry me too much because I only ever play solo anyway, so I can interpret the rules how I like. But might get an opportunity in February because the rule writer will be at the Plymouth local show in Plymouth, so I might get a chance to talk to him a little bit and clarify some things. And yeah, but I really think that these rules really suit this particular period where armies were quite large in number, very substantial in some cases, but the fighting did always seem to come down to individual little combats, partly because my feeling is that the units as such, if you can call them units, weren't homogeneous. Individual combatants would be armed with varying weapons, and so that would affect their ability to fight the person standing opposite to them. And I like the way these rules allow you to move numbers of figures, so you're not moving every single individual figure individually. You can move things in groups, on the orders of the command heroes. But when it gets down to the fighting, you're actually throwing dice just dependent on the weapons and the situation of those couple of individual characters or figures that are fighting that particular combat. Again, it adds to the kind of burden of the keeping check on the rules and the mental arithmetic. But I like that. That's kind of my idea of a fun war game, and it's not. It wouldn't suit some people, but I think these rules work really well for the Dark Ages. Okay, right, I'll stop waffling at that point and say thank you very much for watching, and see you on the next video. Bye for now.